played in the very first season of the WIL. And Harvey, I think you're the only person who played on the first day of the WIL and also played on the last.
Well,
Had you ever thought about that?
I don't know about that. I probably played on the first.
You're not sure you played on the final day in 1954?
54?
Mm-hmm.
Edmonton?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the last year.
Yeah, I did. I played up there. I had a home run, too.
Mm.
And we won. I was with Lewiston then. And we won the damn second half, I know. And I had a home run off old Conan. Who I hadn't hit for 2 cents all year, you know.
Now, you, of course, had an outstanding minor league career and played close to 20 years and had a lifetime average of over 300. Not many people have ever retired under the circumstances you did, in which you hit 340-something and 350-something the last 2 years you played. Why on earth did you quit?
Got monotonous, I guess. No, I didn't want to go to the Southern League. Didn't want to play for Little Rock. And I don't know what the hell the other reason was. I wanted to play some more in the Coast League, but couldn't find anybody that would take me on, you know. So
Obviously, you had a long career in the Coast League.
yeah.
Any of the three of you, there had been no lesser minor league baseball in the Northwest. The Coast League being the only minor league in the Northwest for more than 15 years when the Western Union National League started in 1937. Individually, did you have any sense of how it suddenly came together and what was it like when it started? Were the ballparks new or were they ramshackle old ballparks or?
Well, Yakima, they built one. That's the reason we had to open on the road.
Mm-hmm.
We played, I think it was 2 weeks on the road, went to Wenatchee and then to Spokane.
And Shirley Parker, the mining man,
And,
was the owner of the Yakima team.
Yeah.
Is it true that he owned Yakima and Spokane
They
both?
both at the same time, that's right.
Because they couldn't find anyone to own the team in Spokane? So how was that ballpark when it was new?
Well, it was all right. But it was like any minor league ballpark.
Now, did you play in the league long enough to be there when they turned the field around and put home plate in a different corner?
No.
Because by the time I came to the Northwest in the 60s, home plate was then in the southeast corner, and I guess it used to be in the southwest corner. They moved it when they expanded or built the community college.
Yeah, well, they started building the community college that first year.
Did they?
Opened there,
Mhm.
yeah.
And who was your manager then?
Ray Jacobs.
Who later managed in Spokane?
Yeah.
Harvey, how'd you happen to end up in the Western National League?
Well, I had signed with Portland, and they didn't have any place else to send me, you know. They sent 5 of us up here, you know, from Portland, and I was the only one that made the team, and they were supposed to be able to buy one of us back. Well, I hadn't gone through the draft, so they couldn't take me back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They took me back, but Judge Landis threw the deal out. And they had a working agreement with San Francisco, so I went down there. They took me.
And you played with Tacoma the first WIL season?
Yeah, yeah.
Who are some of your teammates you remember?
Oh,
Maury Abbott.
no, he came later.
Did he come later?
Yeah, Ernie Raimondi got killed in German Bulge. And,
How about Isaac Hayes?
yeah, he
Was he
came.
there
Yeah,
that
he
year?
came in a year. And Alden Wilkie, who came later. Well, Alden was there, I think, at the start.
And pitched a no-hitter that first season, didn't he?
Yeah, so did Izakai.
Uh-huh.
And we had a great manager the second half, in Sloppy Thurston.
Mm-hmm.
And he made playing ball fun, you know.
I was going to ask, what was the big change when Sloppy became the manager?
Eddie Taylor was the goddamn nervous. He couldn't catch a ground ball in a million years, you know.
When I was in high school, Eddie Taylor was scouting for the Yankees
Yeah.
and always made me fill out his lineup card.
He just couldn't hack it, you know.
Mhm.
Sloppy came in there, and hell, we had fun. He was going out with the guys, chasing gals, and he was going to fine me one night for not drinking beer with him.
Was he responsible for signing Izakai, who was playing semi-ball at the start of the year?
Well, he probably had a lot to do with it, I think.
And that made a big change in your ball club, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Izakai and Wilkie were pretty unbeatable the last half of the season.
What sort of special memories do you have with the no-hitters?
I don't really have anything special about him.
Well, Dwight, I know you remember lefty Izakai, because of course Spokane had to
Too well,
play
he
against him.
pitched a no-hitter against me.
Izakai had a remarkable record over 3 or 4
Yeah.
seasons against Spokane.
Thing about Izakai I'll never understand. I went to the Seals the next spring, and they brought Izakai down there with the Seals, and I'm telling you, he couldn't do a damn thing down there. He couldn't stand on the rubber. He couldn't throw a strike. He was just out of it, you know. And they finally sent him back, you know. And he was good enough to pitch in any league.
The statistics would certainly suggest that he had the league overmatched in this league.
Yeah,
So
but he just was, I don't know, the pressure or something down there, he couldn't stand it, you know.
did he ever get another good chance at the Coast League?
No, I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Well, Dwight, you entered the first WAL season right out of college.
Right.
And college boys playing baseball in those days professionally was a relatively rare experience. What were things like that first year?
Well, it was certainly a new experience. I played with Charlie's brother Roy, and Ollie Arbelbeede and Ernie Bishop were down from Washington State. And we had some others that were just out of college. I was supposed to have been sent back to Canton, Ohio. Earl Shealy, scout for the Boston Red Sox, signed me up down at Willamette, and he was going to send me back there. And then Lewiston lost 23 games in a row, and so they named Wes Schumrick manager, and he started calling for ball players, and that's how I got to Lewiston. We played on an old football field there with a short right field. If you ever got the ball between left and center, it rolled 400 yards.
I've seen that field.
I remember I hit a line drive over second base, and it went about that far. On this side, it was 2 bases. On the side I hit it, it was a home run. The line drive.
First game I played there, they had that concession stand stuck out there in the right center. Yeah. Guys would try to hit the ball there. You got here, play there, you couldn't catch it.
That was an experience too. They had a certain time there in the summer, the snow flies of some kind, a little moth miller, came up after the lights were on at night and would circle around the lights and actually dull the lights so much that they'd have to stall the game for 15 or 20 minutes until the bugs would all die. Do you fellas remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
I do.
Yeah.
That was really a strange experience.
Now, Wenatchee and Bellingham were also in the league. What were the ballparks like there?
Well, Bellingham didn't go in until Lewiston.
Oh, that's right. Lewiston moved up there the next year, yes. What was the ballpark like there? Was that park new at that time?
Bellingham wasn't.
It was kind of a football deal,
Yeah,
too.
it was like that thing in Victoria.
Yeah.
The right field wall was 1,050 feet away.
Just the opposite of Vancouver, which came into the league
Well,
a couple
and
years
center
later.
field was short, and then it was long in left field. It was about 600-700 feet in left field down the line, and 1,000 feet down the right field line.
Well, in 37 in Vancouver, they played in that Con Jones Park, and it was built for soccer. And the right fielder for Vancouver, Angie Ferreras, he had 5 assists one night. I think it was, throwing guys out at first base.
At first base, oh yeah. Well, that other park they went to the following year
Yeah,
was
just
just
as
as bad,
bad,
because you had to run uphill to get to first base.
Yeah, that's right.
But you could sure run fast going from second to third.
Oh, yes.
Downhill.
You had to be careful sliding because you wound up in the dugout.
Yeah, Dwight, I seem to remember you at some time or other telling me stories about Smeet Jolly running uphill in right field there.
And they used to throw him out at first base and just make him so mad he'd get a clean single. And they'd pull the second baseman and the right fielder out there and throw him out every time.
And somebody here last year said that 10 years later, they used to throw Bud Shealy out at first base all the time doing the same
Yeah,
thing.
probably.
That he hit the ball, just rifle shot off that right field fence and throw him out in a flash. Did the league seem stable right away? I mean, was it well enough organized that everybody believed it was going to last?
Well, they drew pretty good, as I remember. They drew pretty good. But Vancouver, they were peculiar because I guess they'd never seen baseball. And they wouldn't say a word. They just sat there like this. Nothing. Didn't make any difference. Their home team, guy hit one, go for three. There wouldn't be a murmur out of the crowd.
Sort of like the fans in Montreal today.
Uh,
And was that way all the time you were in the league?
well, just that first year.
Mhm.
They started warming up after that. But
What are some of the things you remember about that? Obviously, Harvey, you were just there briefly, your second year, and then didn't come back for quite a while. But what are some of the things you remember about that pre-war period?
Well, I don't know really. I never got much chance at San Francisco until my second year. And then I had a terrific year. But I don't know, we thought the league was here to stay and would last forever, I know.
Was there a lot of sense from the public, or how much sense was there from the public that they were glad to see professional baseball come back after so long? It had been 1921, 22 or so before since there'd been, pro ball in places like Yakima and Spokane and Tacoma.
Spokane did real well in attendance. They set Class B records for attendance.
All the time you played every year, just about, they broke the record from the year before.
And we had some great old-time big leaguers there, Smead Jolly and Wes Schulmerich, and those like that added good color to the league.
Do you have a favorite story?
Well, Smead played right, and I played center, and anything 10 feet to his right, he yelled, lots of room, lots of room. I had to go over there and field for him. And we went spring training one year, and we were down in Prosser, and Smead and I roomed together, and I came down with the mumps. And Smead was real worried for about 3 weeks because he said, I can't remember whether I ever had any mumps or not, he said. He was really concerned about that.
did you know his wife?
Yes, Betty.
The big blonde?
Betty and her German Schnauzer
I was
dog.
going to say, did she have a toy schnauzer?
Scared to death of her, he was.
Heard it said by more than one person that Smead Jolly loved to play cards and was the worst card player anybody had ever seen. Is there much truth to that?
We wouldn't start a game unless Smead was ready to play. He was fun to play with.
What did you usually play?
Oh, a lot of different poker games, but they were all poker.
And he was equally bad at all of them?
Yeah, he seemed to be. He was consistent. Like he was at hitting, he was consistently good. And if he could have played in this era when, as a designated hitter, man, he would have been great.
Charlie, you saw Smead play too. What were your thoughts about him as a hitter?
Well, he's one of the great ones with that bat. But they tell a story about him when he first went to the big leagues. It was in, I guess, the old Baker Bowl, and that had a sloping outfield. And first game he was in, somebody hit a fly ball out there anyway, and he had a hell of a time running it down, and it dropped anyway. The game was over where the manager told him, he said, I want you out here early tomorrow, and he said, I want you out there practicing, coming in on fly balls. So the next day he's out there, and they're hitting these short fly balls, he's running in, catching them. Game started. Somebody hit one in, he went in, he caught it. And boy, that's great. Finally, somebody hit one over his head. He went back and he tripped and fell down. I went for a triple. When they come in, he said, well, hell, you taught me how to come in, but you didn't teach me how to go back. But there were several
I heard
in that Coast League that would have been in this day and age of the designated hitter. would have been great, I'll tell you.
I heard the story about Smead when he was in the big leagues where he hit a ball. It was a ground ball and it went through his legs, and he raced back to pick it up, and it went through his legs coming back. And then he was so mad, he picked it up and he threw it over the grandstand, so he had 3 errors on one ball.
And the truth is, amazing, and I have Mel Harder and Clyde Sukeforth, both of whom I've corresponded with, who were teammates, who swear it happened 2 different times in 2 different ballparks, and at least on one of those occasions, the official scorer was merciful and only gave him 2 errors. It supposedly happened once in Baker Bowl and once in Cleveland.
Well, I remember Snead when he was with Oakland. I was playing shortstop.
This is why you were with the Seals.
Yeah. And Snead was always giving it this and that, you know, when he's up there at the plate. You're always trying to pitch him in between swings, you know, and you couldn't do it. If you caught him out there, boy, you better be ready, because he'd hit it when he went back, you know. I remember one night in Oakland that he had just got through hitting a line drive right through me, you know. And the next time up, they're still trying to pitch him in between swings, and they got all up high. And man, he hit that damn thing a country mile. You know? The low ball and the high ball hitter.
Yeah, he was a good low ball hitter.
Yeah.
He'd get down there and flick that wrist.
He's really about one of the greatest hitters I think Coast League ever had, or any league ever had.
Charlie, you mentioned that the Coast League had a few other players who might fall into that same category of designated hitters. Who'd you have in mind?
Ike Boone was one. Do you remember Monroe Dean, Monty Dean?
Oh yeah, you bet.
I think he was playing shortstop, I believe, for it was either the Missions or Oakland. I believe it was Oakland.
Oakland, yeah, probably so.
And he was at the plate hitting, and you had tin cups in them days. You didn't have plastic, but you had these tin cups with a rubber deal around it. And he had a line drive, and it took the doctor about 2 hours to get that away from him. He was turning right inside out.
Who else besides Ike Boone?
But, well, I can think of another one, Big Ed Coleman. Now, there's the one they tell the story there that with Bob Johnson and he were playing for Connie Mack. And they were great buddies and great boozers. And that Mack finally said, one of you's got to go. And the way they tell it, he called him in his office, and he took a coin out, and he said, who wants to call it? Well, Coleman stuttered. So Johnson called it, and he won the toss, and Coleman had, they sent him to St. Louis Browns. There was a big, immense man, and he could swing that bat, believe me.
Ed Coleman, he, I think it was the second year I was with the Seals. We got rained out first day, played a double the next day. It been raining like hell in San Francisco. Here's Big Ed out in right field, you know. And Johnny Barrett, who we just got from the Red Sox to take Dominic DiMaggio's place, was up there hitting. And Johnny Barrett hit a line drive way hard over Coleman's head. And he splashed around out through that rain there in right field, and right at the last, Ed stuck his bare hand up and caught that damn ball, you know. And Johnny Barrett says they'd been reading in the paper all spring about what a time he was going to have taking Dominic DiMaggio's place. He says, Jesus Christ, what kind of a league is this?
Back to the WIL for a moment. What do any of you remember about that first season in particular? Is there a game or a moment or a play or something that happened that sticks in your mind 61 years later?
I remember the surprise I got in the Lewis bus It was about a 21 passenger Dodge bus with wicker seats, and they were too close together. Your knees would wear the skin off while you were bouncing, and that was really a miserable time that we had riding in the bus. And somebody reminded me I didn't go to Bellingham. I got released the night before the second year, and somebody told me they had that bus all year up in Bellingham.
Moose Claybaugh, remember him?
Yeah.
Well, Moose come down to play at Salem with us when I was there. And that bus, he's sitting there like this, he's complaining, and Billy Bishop, the general manager, and he was riding with us. And he said, Moose, he said, I took you out of the gutter and I gave you a job, quit complaining. Moose says, well, if I got to ride this so-and-so, brother, he put me back in the gutter.
Al Leitner tells the story. It had to be the same season because Claybaugh was only there half a year. Tells the story about one night the first baseman was hurt, and Claybaugh played first base.
Oh, don't bring that up.
Yeah.
That was in Yakima.
Was that in Yakima?
Yeah, that's when he ran.
Yeah, you tell the story.
He ran up to home plate to start with, and he said, get your foot off that dimmer switch, he said, and get the brights on. You could look around the outfield, and the lights was out all over the place. They wouldn't change them. What the hell?
And is it true the ball finally landed in the stands?
Well, somebody hit a big high foul ball, and he went charging into the mound, hollering, I got it, and he's giving it this shot here, and he's looking around, and where'd that son of a bitch go? And it went over the stands. Well, Leitner was playing third base that night, and I was playing second, and you couldn't help but laugh. And we had a young kid on the mound from San Diego. It had good stuff and had a hard fastball, and it did something. And the first inning, guy got a base hit. He's on first base anyway, and Moose is over there. And hell, he tells his buddy Griffith, yeah, I can play first. So he's standing over there, and he's like this anyway, and he puts his hands up here. The guy turns, and he fires, and he hit Moose right here. The ball bounced right back to the pitcher. And that Claybaugh rolled over on the ground, and he grabbed that leg. And we all went over there and was standing around him. And the pitcher come over anyway. And Moose looked up at him, and he said, I'm all right. He said, young fellow, if you show that same thing to home plate, you're going to pitch a no-hitter today. But,
and is it true, although he became, or was, a famous minor league slugger himself, he wore very thick glasses, is that true?
That's true. You remember this now, especially in the Coast League there when he played for Portland?
Yeah.
A fly ball would be hit to him, and he'd stand there in right field, give us this shot here. And then the last minute, that's where he caught it. The other guy never caught one here, it was always out here. But he'd stand there, give us this shot here, and then catch the ball. I asked him, why the hell don't you get over in front of it? Well, he says, I am. Jack Wilson always said he was afraid he was going to get hit in the head. That's the reason he only played it off to the side.
Now, Harvey, you had a real outstanding season that year, first year of the WIL. What is it that you remember out of that season?
Well, I don't know. I know I was either first, second, or third all year in the league. It was my first year. And,
Yeah, that was your first full year of pro ball.
yeah.
You wore our pitching staff out.
Well, it was, I think maybe I wore a lot of them out.
What was your best game that year? Do you remember?
Not really. I had a lot of 4-for-5s and a couple of 4-for-4s, I suppose, but I was just consistent all year. And I thought I could hit anybody, and I did. And I went to the Coast League.
And Tacoma had a good club that year, didn't it?
Yeah, I did the same in the Coast League.
Well, great. Thank you very much. So, Ray, you started out to be a soccer player?
No, just when I was a kid. Yeah.
Grade school.
Just
That-
a-
that-
A hell of a soccer player.
The two of you grew up in the Rainier Valley,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
Franklin.
And did either of you then play with Fred Hutchinson?
Yes, I did.
I was the bat boy.
I played all the way through with Fred. Yeah,
were there other
he was my good friend.
were there professional players on that team?
Well, Dewey Soriano, he played.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many
I don't
others.
think there were
It's
any.
been so long ago.
And in the mid and late 30s, Seattle high school baseball was very high quality, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I know Mike Budnick is here.
Yeah.
He and Edo Vanny played at Queen Anne.
Good quality baseball, right, good ball players.
Of course, some of the other players in the league you remember from that time.
Oh, gosh.
Earl Johnson, huh?
Yeah, Earl Johnson and his
Chet.
brother Chet Johnson.
Yeah.
And
Al Kretschmar.
No, I didn't know he was from Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played in this league a couple years.
He was in the police department for long.
So Ray, how did you turn professional?
well, the Boston Red Sox sent me to St. Mary's College when I got out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I had a free
Earl
scholarship
Shealy was the coach
with Earl Shealy as the coach, right. Very good man.
from
And-
Spokane.
Yeah. And, well, I went down there and played 3.5 years. And then I got drafted in the service. I went 4.5 years in the Army, overseas 3 years, a little over 3 years. So no baseball
Yeah.
during the war.
Yeah. So you signed originally with the
But I
Padres?
belonged to the Red Sox all the way through,
Mm-hmm.
Boston.
And they sent you to San Diego.
Yeah. They sent me to San Diego.
Were your teammate Ted Williams while you were there?
No, I played for 2 men, you know their names. One was Rip Collins, and the other one was
Pepper Martin.
Pepper Martin. Yeah? 2 good guys.
You must have played with a few other players who played with you in the WIL after the war, maybe too.
Oh, yeah, in the WIL, yeah.
And San Diego, guys you played with in San Diego, weren't there a few others who ended up in the WIL?
Oh, gosh. That's a long time, I can't remember.
Anyway, so Len,
He had to tell you the story about Jack Lorkey. Ask you about Lorkey.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, this one year, Jack Larkey, he was sent to Spokane, wasn't he?
Yeah.
1946.
Yeah, to Spokane. And I was supposed to go to Spokane too. And somehow I got rerouted. And I didn't go. And that was the time that the bus went over the bank. And a few of the boys got killed.
I drove by there today.
Oh, did you?
So where did you play that year?
I managed Modesto in the Cal State League. I was a manager.
Oh, in 1946?
Yeah.
And the Padres sent you there?
Yeah.
And so then how'd you end up in the WIL?
Oh, they sent me down, San Diego sent me down in 47 or 48, and I went to Tacoma in the Western International League.
That's right. Bill Starr of the Padres had some
Bill
connection
Starr
with
was
Tacoma.
he was right. So I played there for a year or 2, and then was sold to Vancouver, Capellanos. I went up there and played 3 or 4 years, I don't know how many years, and then they sent him up there. He was at Oklahoma City at the time. So they wanted a double play combination, and he was a third baseman. So they asked me if I could make a second baseman out of him. And boy, if you only knew how many hours we practiced that double play. And thanks to Bill Brenner, he really helped us. He was a manager at the time, and we held the double play record for about 2 years in a row.
So Len, you grew up and followed in Big Brother's footsteps.
That's right. That's right. From the time that, of course, Ray didn't tell you some of the real highlights, but he had one of the greatest arms in baseball when he was in college. He broke the world's collegiate record throwing the ball 416 feet 6 inches. And it's in the book.
411 and 411.
Well, okay. But at any rate,
Where'd you go to college? Or did you just break?
it's in the Guinness Book of Records, but it's still in there, I think. But at any rate, when we were kids, we had a dirt road in front of our house, and we'd play catch. And I'd be a block away, and he'd throw me the ball, and I'd run a half a block and throw it back to him. And he'd just throw it on the line.
I seem to remember from last year's tape you talking about throwing the ball off a concrete wall too.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit later, but he was trying to teach me to be an infielder, so he backed me up against a 6-foot concrete wall.
and then he'd hit me line drives on the ground, and I finally found out if I'd missed him, they'd hit me in the back or hit me in the back of the head. So I learned damn quick to catch a ground ball. And then we had a milkman used to stop, old Mac, and he used to hit pop flies, and he'd hit them 9 miles in the air. And so that was my other practice suite.
And you signed right out of high school with the Rainiers?
I signed right out of high school, and this was in 1943, actually the end of 42. Babe Barbaras was after me, and he was one of the local scouts. And Torchy Torrance, of the Seattle organization, convinced me to sign with Seattle. And God, I signed for more money than I ever seen in my life. It was $500, and I got $362 after taxes. And so that was after I came back from the service in 1946. And they sent me down to join the Seattle Ball Club.
So you didn't play professionally before the war?
No.
Or during the war?
Well, no. During the war, I was in the Marine Corps, and we had a makeup club, and played overseas, but nothing really organized. But I joined Frisco in 46, the end of the year, and I really got my upbringing in the last month and a half or so with Seattle and Pacific Coast League. I was only 21 years old, and I got a real education. But from there,
a veteran ball club.
Yeah, I was with the Seattle organization for about 4 years off and on, but I was option ball player to begin with to Vancouver in 47, and we had some great ball clubs up there in 47, 48, 49, but then they sent me down to Birmingham and the Southern Association, and up to Scranton, back in the Boston organization, same one Ray was in. And but they had their players already figured out in those two towns, so I came back to Vancouver. And then the following year, 1951, I was optioned down to Oklahoma City in the Texas League, and I spent the whole year there.
I noticed that there was a year missing out of the WIL record.
Yeah. And we had
the two of you played together at Vancouver before and after this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You said Bill Brenner had a real influential...
He did. He worked with us trying to make a double play combination.
What kind of a guy was Bill? I mean, he was somebody else who played in the league for its entire history.
Fantastic guy.
He was an old B-17 pilot during the war.
Was he?
Yeah, he was a great
guy. He was a hell of a ball player.
Big man, wasn't he?
Huh?
Pretty well built, yeah.
He ended up being a knuckleball pitcher.
I was going to say, I'll bet you can answer my giant Bill Brenner mystery, which is a man who had been a professional catcher for 15 years, overnight almost became a pitcher, and won 20 games 3 years in a row.
He could always throw a knuckleball. So, you know.
Did he ever pitch the odd game before that?
No.
What?
Not when he was managing our ball club. He was always catching.
Why did he change?
Well, he caught all the time. He caught just about every game we ever played.
I think he's just unpredictable. He's the kind of guy that I always like to face up to new challenges. But
he's a good athlete.
He was nearing the end of his career.
Yeah.
And almost overnight. He pitched part-time in 1951. In 52, 53, and 54, he won over 20 games all 3 years. Did he throw knuckleball every pitch?
No. He used the changeup.
He was hard to hit, I'll tell you. We played against him, too.
He didn't have a great fastball, but the knuckleball was
danced all over the
It was
place.
good.
Now, Ido Vanning told me a story, I think it was Ido last year, told me a story that Bill almost lost his job as the manager at Vancouver because Bob Brown didn't think he was colorful enough. And it was Ido, because he was telling a John Nenezich story. And
True
John
story.
deliberately called the guy safe who was out one night.
True story.
And Bill ran out on the field.
Yeah.
You were there?
It was common knowledge. Yeah. But, you know, you have to know Bob Brown, though, too, to understand why that came out.
What was Bill's managerial style?
He was a good manager. When he said something, you listened to
He was
him.
very stern.
Yeah, he knew his baseball.
And he wouldn't back down.
Very well respected.
But not temperamental.
Pardon?
Not temperamental, though.
No.
I wouldn't
He wasn't
think so,
temperamental.
no.
But he was tough. He wasn't really tough on his ball players, but he was very stern. And when he said something, there was no arguing with him.
He wanted to win.
And he had a good rapport with umpires, but he never backed down from an umpire either. But he had good rapport with them. They did really well.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of the WIL, the two of you both went to Tri-City, where Ido was the manager, you had great offense. And
Pitching.
one of the club finished third, the other club I was going to ask was pitching an instrumental part of that. Is because the 1953 team was first in the league in hitting, and was that the year you had a wonderful year?
Yeah. But one of the highlights over there was the fact we get up in the morning in our rental house and we'd pick asparagus in the front yard. The house was built on an old asparagus field.
Now, Ray, in '54, which was the last year of the WIL, you only played 10 games. Were you injured, or did you
Hurt my
retire?
arm. Yeah, I hurt my arm. That finished me.
So you never
I
played?
had a bone, I went in the second base to break up a double play. I hit the guy with my shoulder, and I had a bone separation. So once you have one of them, that's it. Knocked the bones apart.
Ooh.
So,
How much?
well, I can't throw from here to that table
I was
now.
going to say, how much does it still bother you?
No, it doesn't bother me, but I just can't throw. But,
What are your best memories of the WIL?
oh, I'd say the guys, a really good bunch of guys. Everybody got along so damn good together. You know,
How much of an influence was it the fact that many men spent most or all of their careers in the league? Was that a big factor?
Oh, probably so. When you're traveling down, I told the story before, but traveling down the Yakima Canyon 70 miles an hour in the middle of the night and run into a herd of horses and with a fine bunch of guys and having a lot of fun with a case of beer in the aisle and living it up from town to town, getting a little sleep and going out and playing ball a couple of nights. And then there was one trip we made from Wenatchee in the afternoon, and we had to go to Edmonton, Alberta. And we drove for a whole night. All next day, we were supposed to play a ball game at 7:30 that night. We got there at 6:30 in the evening. Got out of the bus, went out and played a ball game. But there was, when you're young, that's like water off a duck's back. But there's always a lot of good rapport with the ball players. There's never any fights or anything like that other than the Ray Minor. The guys got along real good.
And at the same time, that was an era of showmanship throughout minor league baseball, and certainly the WIL throughout its entire history, starting with Wes Shulmerich in 1937, had its share of showmen who included Ito. Now, I know several crazy things Ito did while he was at Spokane. Were there some things that he did during those 2 seasons you were at Tri-City that you remember?
Oh, yes.
yeah.
That you
Well,
Outside of baseball, there's plenty of things that he did, I'll tell
We
you.
did.
He was a character.
we get into the lobby and 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's giving the President Roosevelt's speech over the microphone that's sitting on the cashier's desk. And then we had a few more excursions too.
Do you remember where that was?
Huh?
Do you remember where that was?
That was in the Yakima. Well, it's the Yakima or Wenatchee. No, that was in Salem. That was in Salem.
One of the few towns in the league where he never played.
Yeah,
He wrestled Bears that he'd never played there.
You talk about Bears, we were going to, through Banff, going up to Winnipeg, or not Winnipeg, Calgary and Edmonton. And this catcher we had, Jack Warren, I don't know if you heard of
He was
him.
a fine hitter.
Beanie.
Yeah, Beanie we called him.
Why?
He's just well, opening day at the Seattle Ball Club, the 6 Seattle Stadium, he hit a home run over the fence and patted with bases loaded, and he passed the guy that was ahead of him. Coming around the bases,
He's quite
which
a
was
hitter.
out.
We were way up there on the way to Banff, and we stopped for piss call, and we all got out of the bus. We just about all of them in, and the bear come toddling over there, and old Beanie went and got a bat. He went out
Fungal bat was chasing
he
the
was
bear up the
chasing
road.
that bear up down the road.
You told part of this story last year, and I didn't know who it was you were talking about.
Is that story?
Yeah.
That was Beanie.
That was Jack.
He took a fungal bat and he was in his shorts. It was the middle of the night, and here's the bear, like Ray says, and he's chasing the bear up the road with a fungal bat.
Ray, what did you do after baseball?
I bought a produce market, not a market, but a business. The wholesale.
Wholesaler.
Wholesale. I worked from Anaheim to Los Angeles, in and out of Los Angeles from Anaheim. And I had 3 trucks on the road. And I made a good business of it.
You lived in the Seattle area all this time, though? Or did you live in
No,
California?
I lived in Anaheim then.
Oh,
But I just moved up to this area about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh,
After my wife died.
Oh.
My wife died in California. My kids told me Dad, there's no sense sticking around here. You go sell a house and do what you want to do. We're all set. I've got 5 kids down there. And so I did. I bought a place up at Lake Limerick, and where I live now. And it's a nice little place.
And speaking of Anaheim, that's where you began your professional
Yeah,
career.
that's where I began.
And you were a teammate of a pitcher named Gus Hallberg,
Oh, yes.
who was on the bus with the Spokane Indians in 1846.
That's true.
In fact, Gus was your best pitcher.
Gus was a very, very good pitcher, yeah. And Bob Stagg was there too, if I remember right. Yeah,
A catcher, right?
yeah,
Who later played
catcher,
in the
yeah.
WFL. Well, I just discovered that yesterday,
Yeah.
that we played in Anaheim. And so they're against some future big leaguers in that league. Wally Westlake
Wally
comes to
Westlake,
mind.
yeah.
Bob Chesney's maybe, a couple others.
Uh-huh.
Len, what'd you do after baseball?
Well, after baseball, I for about 4 years before I retired, I worked for the Boeing Company in off-season. And so then after I quit, I stayed with them. Spent 38 years working for the Boeing Company in management circles and executive management circles. And I retired in 1985.
What sort of responsibilities did you have for them?
Pardon?
And what area were you working in?
I was in the fabrication division, mostly did a lot of traveling for the company, back on the East Coast and into Canada, but mostly with fabrication.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
The historical information in the program. For those of you that were here last year, Jim put a lot of time and energy into a couple of articles that kind of captured briefly kind of a synopsis of each year, a year-by-year blow of the WIL from 37 to 54. And in the article, I'm not going to read Jim's entire resume, but I would like Jim to stand up and be recognized for his outstanding contribution. Jim Price. Now, if enough of you stop by and tell Jim what a great job he did, maybe that'll help just further the book on the history of the Western International League that some of us keep trying to convince him to take on. And each time we do a banquet, the information he provides gets further and further along. But it was kind of fun to see the impressive all-time roster that Jim put together. And he knows there's still some omissions, and some of you have some information you want to pass on to Jim to try and get it updated would be certainly appreciated. Also wanted to introduce a special guest. His name is Kak Wasman, and Kak was a Lincoln High School graduate. He was a 9-letter winner over at Eastern Washington College. He was the first coach at Puyallup High School, and one of his team members is being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I'd like to have Kak stand up and be recognized. Kak turns 91 in June, so we're real pleased to have him here. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had a special guest, and we had a very impressive display of memorabilia regarding Alexander Cartwright, who is the father of modern-day baseball, and we're real pleased to have his great-great-grandson, Alexander Joy Cartwright IV, who is here. He's a local resident, and I wanted to be sure and introduce him and let him tell you about a new venture that he's involved in. Alexander?
It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'd like everybody to know that if you have access to the World Wide Web, that on Tuesday, the 27th of this month, we're debuting our commercial world-class website called Mr. Baseball, and it is dedicated to my great-great-grandfather, and it will give you a pictorial presentation of the last 150 years of Major League Baseball from its inception in 1846 through 1997. Thanks very much for letting me be here tonight. Enjoy. Thank you.
What's the address?
The World Wide Web address is www.mrbaseball.com.
You have it on your business cards too, right? Which I'm sure you have a couple extra to hand out. The next two items on the program, we do want to recognize the 1950 Midland baseball team, which were the Valley and Sunset League champions. We have some real nice information in the program on page 12, and hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. And then we are also going to present our 1998 Hall of Fame inductees into our local Oldtimers Hall of Fame. Then we will break for dinner, and then we'll come back with the WIL portion of the program. So without further ado, what I would like to do is ask team member Bob Fredericks to come on up here, and I would like members and representatives of that 1950 ball club to come on up and just line up here in front of the stage, if you would come up now.
Hello everyone, glad to see everybody could make it today, and real fortunate to have our baseball team on it. We probably weren't the greatest team in Tacoma, but we were good. And the reason we were good is because we would play at any time, any place, anywhere. And I'll introduce our ball players are a part of our team that we had. The first one on the right is George Amaji. George played third base for us for several years. And next one is Chuck Bozo. Chuck, we drafted from the town of Twist. We went up there and played ball one year, and he did so good against us, we brought him down to play with us. Next one is shortstop Glenn Couture. Glenn was an outstanding player, played over in Yakima for several years, and he decided to join our team too. Next in line is John Hansler. John was our third one. He played with Lincoln High School and played several years for us until he decided to go into the law business. I think it was probably a little more lucrative to go into the law business. Next in line is Bob Witzer, who played outfield for us. Bob also decided to give up his baseball career and go into law business. Next in line is Don Jacobson, who played third base for us. And Don gave up his career as baseball playing for us to go into the Air Force. And next is Aki Larson. Aki was our pitcher and has been real instrumental in getting this team recognized and also myself. And we really appreciate all the work that Aki's done. Okay. We also have 3 members of our team that are deceased, but their sons are going to receive the plaque for them. One of them is Ray Wing's son, Ben Minchell, and Maury Taylor. Aki Larson also has a few words he'd like to say to us, so thank you.
We have one more, Ray Wing family. Dixieland boys, we have a representative. Line up. You're a member of the Midland baseball team. I'm sorry. The reason I want to make a comment was that Bob McGinnis, sorry guys, he was our friend and still is our friend in a sense. But Bob invited me to be in this committee quite a few years ago as sort of a bystander, and I probably am sort of a bystander. But I tried to help out because I've known of this type of association for many, many, many years through my father, who always talked about this group, and the many people who already were joined into this organization and Hall of Fame and so on. And I had a chance to, throughout the years, observe the different teams and groups who have been named into this association. And I thought that this is a good time now to try to recognize many of these smaller teams, town teams, as we really knew them. Now, this is the Midland team is just one team, made up of Glenn came as a veteran, and there John, I think, John, you snuck past the war, I think, and he was John and Glenn were the players from other teams in a sense before us, 2 years behind before us, with guys like Dave Malora, and I see more friends over there from the Midland Junior High School team. Many of them were just a group that we just gathered together one by one, and finally we joined our forces with the McKinley Avenue team, which I want to give credit for because otherwise they'll never forgive me. And they really made the team together in the 1950 when they all grew together with the veterans of the other teams that were around the Midland area, and then the McKinley Avenue team, and we did travel around many teams around. We even gathered Chuck Bowles along with us. We picked him up even. He came and moved to Tacoma so he could play with us. Although there probably was a job situation for him too somewhere, for all I know. But the point being here is, though, for the association, I think it's a good time now to really start recognizing some of these smaller teams, groups of teams, because there's so many guys around here that travel, and you've seen them in other teams. I'm glad that a team like this is finally recognized. There are other teams around. The association has looked at other teams, the Spanaway team, and many other teams that we're going to be that will be, I hope, honored later on. So, and I think Mark and the group here will really do a good job in that. So, I'd like to thank everybody here and Mark and the association for what they've done to the group today. I think it's a good step in the right direction, and it's the right kind of people. Thank you very much.
We have two gentlemen, Jim Hentz and Mike Sage, who are here, our photographer and video expert, to try and capture today's event to keep over the years. So we'd like you gentlemen here to get together so we can take one last team photo.
Actually, I play with them. They just put me on a better health program.
Yes. Let's have the representatives from the from Ben and Pat.
Sooner or later.
Thank you, Ben.
Hey, all the Hall of Famers. And actually, anyone else who wants to come up, we'll recognize you. Some of the Hall of Famers are not here, and if you look on page 5 of the official program, you will recognize and be able to read all their accomplishments as they enter the Tacoma Pierce County Hall of Fame. First of all, and Holly G. and Bob Young, who are the co-chairmen for the banquet, will make some presentations. Bob Lightfoot is our first 1998 Hall of Famer. I would also mention, if you look on page 5, you'll find the reasons why they are being inducted, their great accomplishments over the year. Number 2 in the 1998 Hall of Fame is Harry Nygaard. Incidentally, we'll have each of them say a few words. Some of them are not at a loss of words. So Bob Lightfoot, let's go with you first, and then we'll have Harry make a couple of comments.
Reading the program today, I saw Marv Scott's name and Dick Palmodesti's name, and I succeeded both those gentlemen at Wilson High School. And it was a tough act to follow in both situations, and Wilson High School did and still has a lot of great baseball players and a lot of great tradition. I appreciate this award tremendously. I'd like to thank my brother for making life tough on me through the years and helped me with the competitive aspect of athletics. My dad, who taught me more about coaching than anybody else. Bob McGinnis is not here right now, a great friend, I really appreciate. And Sonia Civitanich, who's made the last 6 months extremely pleasant for me. And thanks to all those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, Harry Nygaard.
Well, I'd like to thank the Hall of Fame committee for selecting me into the Hall of Fame. I consider it a great honor. Thank you very much on that part. And I also want to thank the being in sports as much as I have. It was my whole life to me. I hurt my arm when I got through playing ball, or when I was in high school, I hurt it. And I got into selling vacuum cleaners by fluke by another quite an athlete, Morgan Borowski, that talked me into going out selling. And I remember the day when he tried to get me to go with him, I said, the day I sell vacuum cleaners door to door, that'll be a rainy day in hell. But the sports carried me through. I was so, always wanted to win. I was so competitive that every time they used to put up prizes, that I would always try and win every prize there was. And consequently, I made one heck of a lot of money. I won automobiles, trips all over the country, and it sure wasn't through my knowledge or education of being that carried me where I came today. I'm heading for Las Vegas as soon as this thing's over, and my luck was today to be in this thing, and I hope my luck is there in Vegas.
Thank you, Harry. The next inductee, a Lincoln High School graduate, Maury Taylor. With his son, this is Maury's son, will accept and make the response here. Maury was a great ball player, and we're happy to have him in the Hall of Fame. Maury?
Well, I got a little script here, but it really ain't about everything Dad did during his time as far as a player, but it's got to do with an extension of his playing time. And it says, what I got here, it says, hi, I'm Pat. I'm one of my dad's 4 boys. I'm here in honor of my dad. I don't have all the facts and knowledge of his playing days because it was before my time, but do recall how he came to life when he would tell of his playing days. One did not have to listen for long to know that this game called baseball was in his blood. From what's been told to me, Dad had the talent for the game. And what I personally know is that he thoroughly enjoyed the competition that came with the game. He was scouted by and had tryouts for what was in that day the St. Louis Browns, a professional baseball organization. Seems his base running is what hindered him from a contract. How well I know, speed does not run in this family. Dad coached Little League football and baseball for 33 years at Dawson Park, which has a memorial now known in his honor and name for the commitment he has made for the community. He loved to win, but the glory of winning really was a result of the preparation, work habits, and training that was installed in his players. He not only was a coach, but also had a genuine interest in the kids. My brothers and myself didn't have a choice to play sports. We were thrown a glove or a ball and told to hit the field. And we all have many stories and memories to treasure today for that. One last thing I never told you was what position he played. He was a catcher. Now, guess what position my 3 brothers and myself had to play? catcher. I'm thankful I had a dad whose name was Maury Taylor. This here today is in honor of my dad. This is true, but I will add that Mom just passed away April 23rd, and we'll give her some credit too. They say behind every successful man is a good woman. Marge, my mom, was that woman. She was instrumental in keeping the show alive. In our household, sports was the name of the game. My parents are gone, but the memories live on. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Two members who are inducted today are unable to be here, Primo Arto and Vic Martino. Now the next inductee into the Hall of Fame, his son will accept for Ray Wing.
Hi, I didn't know I was going to be making a little presentation here, but I know that my dad would be very, very proud of this. And the whole time that us boys were growing up and watching my dad play, we'd always stop, and every time they said, you know, my dad was up or he's making a great play, us kids would stop and watch my dad play. And the thing that we remember the most is that everybody, as over the years, as they've talked about my dad and the way he's played, he was a hell of a ball player, and he really was. And I'm very proud of this, and I want to thank everybody for it, and on behalf of my family, too. Thanks.
Now the final inductee, a graduate of Puyallup High School in 1947, Bob Fredericks.
It really is a great honor to be accepted into this, and I would like to thank some of the people that are responsible. First of all, my coach at Puyallup High School, who got me started on the right path and who's always been there, and I still a great friend and former teacher, Cac Wasman. And also, I would like to thank the team that I played with for allowing me to play with them. Like I said before, they weren't the greatest team, but they were a good team. But as you get older, things change, and they were the greatest team. And they were also great people to be with, and I really appreciate them as fellow players, and I really do thank them for allowing me to play with them. And that's about all I have to say. I thank you again for allowing me to play ball and to receive this. Thank you.
Now, one more time, let's again salute all the 1998 Hall of Fame inductees: Bob Lightfoot, Harry Nygaard, Maury Taylor, Ray Wing, Primo Arto, Vic Martino, and Bob Fredericks. Once again, we want a picture taken, so will you all assemble in front of the rostrum here so our excellent photographers can snap a excellent ball player. And I think the one thing that we remember about Bryce, that he survived the Bataan Death March in the Philippines.
Well, God, Almighty God, we just thank Thee that we can be together like this, a bunch of guys and a bunch of fans, and guys that at one time when the greatest thing in the world was to feel the smack of a baseball in a glove and be able to throw that baseball 300 or 400 feet without hurting your shoulder. And the same thing, how great it was to step up to a plate and get the fat part of a bat on the ball and see it sail out over the fence. And again, God, we just thank that we can get together and remember these things, and just pray that we'll all get home safely. Amen.
Unbeatable introductions. We have the WI leaguers dating way back to the 1930s. And earlier I acknowledged that Mark Blau was going to make those introductions about an hour and a half ago. We didn't want to keep too many of the old WI leaguers up, so I thought, for instance, that he could give him that, could have given that early. But now to give those introductions, here is Mark Blau.
One award that we did want to acknowledge before we get into the WIL portion is that of the Dill Howell Award. And unfortunately, the Dill Howell Award this year is being given to the Gottfried and Mary Fox Foundation, which is a local foundation here in Tacoma. And it gives a lot during each and every year for a variety of charitable and educational purposes. And there's information on page 4 of your program, and I'm not going to read everything, but the Fox Foundation was very instrumental in giving a considerable amount of money to the construction of a very nice baseball complex at Bellarmine High School here in Tacoma. And even though there's nobody here today to accept it, we did want to recognize their contribution because it's that kind of community involvement that we need here. This is the second year for our WIL reunion, and it's just very gratifying to see how many people are able to come and make the commitment. And it really is a major commitment because we have so many people. Actually, a little bit disappointing personally that there aren't more of our Tacoma Tiger WIL members here. We have a couple of them here today, and there's certainly a lot more in the community. But extremely gratified to see how many have come from such far distances. And we are going to take a moment to recognize everybody. But truly, you folks are the ones that make this happen. The fact that you're willing to time, the effort, have the interest, and the budget to afford coming up here and spending a couple days. And hopefully, maybe you needed that little extra motivation to come from Southern California or whatever, Oregon, east side of the mountains. But hopefully once you've gotten here, you've had a great time. Certainly I remember the comment that Pete Jonas made last year. Pete had been on our mailing list before. Last year was the first time he came, and the last thing he said was, "I will never miss one of these again." And it's those kind of comments that make us feel good and make us want to keep putting forth the effort to make these events happen. Of course, for me, personally, it's a lot of fun to track down people and get a chance to talk because you all played baseball back in a great time when the friendships and camaraderie was extremely important. Just to tell you one little quick story, sometimes in the past it's been a great challenge finding people. Now with the use of the internet and the people search, it becomes a lot much easier. And if you have the last name of it becomes really easy because how many of those are there out in the world? And so I had a Bremerton program, and I was going through, scrolling through the names. I said, I'm going to try that one. And the internet was real easy, and I found Bill down in Westport, and we talked on the phone. And Bill, would you just stand up real quickly and wave your hand? Bill Costabader. Bill several years, but I called up Bill and we started talking baseball, and he said, well, look, why don't you come on down and we'll talk some more about baseball, and I have a fishing boat, and I go out every day. I'm up at the crack of dawn. Let's go out fishing. So last August I took my 13-year-old, and neither of us had been salmon fishing, and we showed up at the dock, and we knew we were in for a treat when we got down to the boat, and the name of the boat was the SOB. We knew we were in for some fun, and we did have a great time. We're dogfish. My son was the only one that caught the salmon, so he was on cloud 9. If you want to have some fun, I guarantee you, call up Bill, and he'll take you out fishing. You'll have a wonderful time. He knows all of the spots that there are, whether it be tuna or sea bass or salmon or whatever. But it's those kinds of stories. That's the fun of tracking down people like you. What I wanted to do was introduce everybody that is here. Last year we had everybody not only stand up but also say a few words, and we were closing. It was getting dusk before we got out of here, so we're going to try and speed things up a little bit. But I think it's important for everybody to know who is here. So as I call your name, If you want to just stand up real quickly and you can hold your applause, but I do want to recognize everybody because, again, without you, this banquet and this portion of the program wouldn't happen. So from Spokane, Dwight Aiden. From Seattle, Montlake Terrace, Hunk Anderson. From San Francisco, Rugger Artizoa. Charlton made it. Let's see, from Goodsport, Frank Constantino. From Tacoma, Cy Graylaw. Clay Huntington, sportscaster for the Tacoma Tigers. From Spokane, Pete Jonas. Pete. Bat Boy 1939, or Clubhouse Boy, Gene Kelly. Tacoma back there. Ian Will from over Westport. From the Oakland area, Ray Brady. Where's Ray? There he is. From Oregon, I can't pronounce the city you're in, but Lynn Neal. How do you pronounce that? Scio, Oregon. From York, California, Mel News. From Long Branch, Washington, Harry Nygaard. Kennewick, Charlie Peterson. There he is. From Sacramento, Lenny Peterson. Back there. From down California, Irvine, I believe, Don Freeze. Over here. From Sacramento, John Tintar. Did you want to say something real quick? Yeah. I give you 30 seconds. Go. You're going to come up here?
Oh, did you?
I'm going to keep it up here. Let's see here. From Sacramento area, we have Marjorie Richards and Ted Richards. Marjorie is Dick Richards' wife, and Ted is his son. Dick was one of the owners in Yakima, Tri-City, and Wenatchee ball clubs. You keep coming up, and I'll keep talking. Al Ronning from Sunnyvale. Representing her husband who cannot be here, Al Schimling, played with the Tacoma Ball Club, his wife Betty. Say I got to talk. Betty, put your hand up. Say hi, Betty. Harvey Story. Thanks, Forest Grove, Oregon. Len Tran and brother Ray Tran. Over there. Virgo from Tacoma. Big Wiggle from Klamath. Mike Bushing from Seattle. We already met and introduced John Jarstad, now living in Southern. Red Adams from Rancho Loretta. Thank you, Red. Jim Levitt from the Gig Harbor area. And Warren Noyes from Monroe. And who did I miss? Did I miss anybody else?
And their daughter, Joanna. And I want this little guy to stand up and shake his hand to me. Hey, Jay. Vintar. Hi, AJ. And I almost forgot somebody. It's my lovely wife, Marguerite Pintar. Please stand up and think about Marguerite. Stand think about Marguerite. We are going to celebrate our 63rd anniversary next month. I am 84 years of age, and I have retired. I played for Wenatchee in the late 1930s, and we had some great ball players at that particular time, and probably most of you recognize by the name of Bill Bevins. He almost pitched a no-hitter in the World Series. Then we had also Eddie Kears and Al Lean, a very good friend of mine who lives in Canby, Oregon, and Jack Andrews, who passed away just recently at Orville, California. And I've got to tell
tell you this little story. It's so when I was assigned to the Cardinal organization, I had a chance to meet Mr. Frank Rickey, who was instrumental in at that particular time to break the barrier there. And he said, John, come to St. Louis and I will discuss your contract with me. I said, fine. So I drove to St. Louis and seen Mr. Rickey in his office. He said, okay, John, what is your problems? Oh, Mr. Rickey, I had a very good year in the minor league. And the economy is getting a little higher and higher and so on. I said, I think, Mr. Rickey, that I should receive more money. So then he said, that's all. I said, yes. He said, okay, John, sit down for a minute. Let me tell you my story. So he went on, and I think he was the greatest psychologist I ever met in my life. And he said, John, let me tell you something. We have so many leagues in the C League, D League, F League, A and B and C League there. And he said, if we break a bat down there, it costs us 75 cents. And if we lose a baseball in the major league, it costs us $1. And he said, you know one thing, they don't throw the ball back anymore. So I said, well, Mr. Rickey, okay. So I said, you know, Mr. Rickey, what I believe? I said, I believe that I should take a cut in my salary. And there's some major leaguers here, I'm sure that I don't know if they played in the 30s like I did. So I said, well, anyway, I'll get back to the point there. And I said, well, do you know what my salary was for in the 1940s? Well, the St. Louis Cardinals was $600 a month. And just imagine what the ball players are getting nowadays there. So, anyway, I played in the Pacific Coast League for a number of years. And one of my greatest teams I played with was Sacramento in 1940s, early 1940s, when the Pacific Coast Championship there, in 1940s there. And at that particular time, the teams were Seattle, and I played in 6 Stadium a number of years when I was in the Coast League there. And then, of course, Tacoma, when I was in the Western International League, I also played in Tacoma as well as in Vancouver. Then we have San Diego. Then we had Los Angeles. There was 2 teams in Los Angeles. There were the Los Angeles Angels and the Hollywood Stars. There was 2 teams there. And then there was Oakland as well as in Portland. And the last team, of course, I played with was Sacramento there. And the only thing I can say, gentlemen, that I wished I was 62 years younger than I am today. And I think I'm a lot better off. Thank you very much.
Now for the next brief speech. Thank you, John. We have a really nice book here. It's called the Tacoma book, and we have a couple gentlemen that have come up. As far as we can tell, the furthest distance to come up here, is, at least as best as I can tell. My geography is not all that great, but that was Al Ronning came up last year from Sunnyvale, and Rugger came up from San Francisco, and I'm not exactly sure where Sunnyvale is in relation to San Francisco, but we decided to just simply determine that age instead of look. So Rugger, we'd like to award this to you. So if you'd come on up and get this book as a little thank you for making this trek up a 2nd year in a row.
No, this is my, if you don't mind, this is my 60th anniversary. I was with Bellingham in 1938. I played against Charlie over there. I know he was with Yakima and Johnny. We were together at the Yankee chain. And a bunch of these guys that were here last year, not here this year, and I sure miss them all. We got a lot of new guys. There's one thing that really made me proud today. Everybody I played with, or against rather, all hit me like they owned me. One guy over here made Belgrady, He's the first guy to admit that I really got him out something on 5 times in one game. Thank you.
I've got a couple of other announcements, and while I'm making those announcements, I would like Jim Price and Don Priest, Ted Richards, Dwight Eaton, and Charlie Peterson to come on up to the stage because they're going to be part of our formal program. So, gentlemen, you can go ahead and come on up and sit up here as we're making the rest of these announcements. If he'd consider being one of our speakers, he was very enthusiastic and said, absolutely yes, hell yes, I can lie with the best of it. So we decided, well, that certainly was good qualifications for being a speaker. And then I was going to read a note. Red Adams was a surprise visitor. Red had contacted me early on in January and had indicated he was going to come up, but really wasn't sure. And actually, I didn't know Red was going to show up until he showed up. And but he was kind enough to put this little note together, and it said, in case I don't make the reunion, please kindly give my regards to my old teammates, Harvey Story, Pete Jonas, Cy Greenlaw, Dick Wavell, Larry Powell, fellow Dodger Al Ronning, players I knew on opposing clubs, Rugger, Bill Beard, Clint Cameron, Huck Killer, Richie Myers, George Nicholas, Al Leitner, Ito Vanny, John Pintar, Bob Stagg, and Al Spader. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I don't think you did, but it's nice that you were here to see all those guys on your own. So thank you for coming up. Larry Powell wrote, we won't be going to Tacoma this year as it's quite a trip for us. I hope you have a good group and a good show. It was a wonderful affair last year. Most of those fellas I had not seen in 40 years. We have our coffee group down at Visalia and we get together pretty often. Nearly all of us played in the WIL at one time or another. Have a good get together. And Larry's been up here a couple different times. Glenn Tuckett, my wife and I are serving as full-time missionaries and won't complete our commitment until July. Please keep our name on the list because I will attend next year for sure and every year thereafter. Please convey my best wishes to all the guys. I'll be thinking of them. And then I had a letter from Ole Sonoila, and he played with Bellingham back in the late 30s. The 3 years I played in the WIL were 3 of the best years of my life. A great experience with a great group of guys that I played both with and against. I lost my left eye to a stroke 24 years ago and I had my left knee replaced. With glasses I can write and read the sports section but can't drive a car. Al Marici pulled off a triple play which took about 30 seconds. I was out there 2 hours and 20 minutes and pitched 10 innings. Was on base 3 times, scored 2 of the 3 runs we needed to go into extra innings. Then to top it off, I was the 3rd out of the triple play. A fine game for me. In Bellingham, during a game, a local bartender offered a case of beer for the next double. I hit what should have been a home run, but it hit a light pole and I got the case of beer. After I got drafted in 41, I saw action in Saipan. After the war, I fished commercial in Alaska for 9 years, the first 4 on a 30-foot sailboat. I've had grapes on my farm for over 50 years and have a 10-acre vineyard, which I now lease out. I get 28% of the gross and just watch it as it is being taken care of. Wish I could be up there for the get-together, but say hi to all my old friends. And then Eddie Pollins wrote, I'm sorry I'm unable to attend due to some health problems in my family, but I'll be there for sure next year. Please say hello to everyone for me, and especially my old teammate, Dwight Eaton. This is from Walt Posake. Just a few words to say, I'm sorry I can't make it this year. I hope to be there next year if they have another one. Would like to tell everyone I really enjoyed my years in the WIL. I really thought I was going to die there, as the old saying went, live and let die in the WIL. I would especially like to tell my old teammates Al Ronning and Bud Jelma I have great memories playing with them. Hope you have a great time, which I know you will. Hope to see you all next year. This letter is from Lil Arnerich. I was trying to figure out, anybody know what Lil's first name is? Very good, Anthony. Thank you for the invitation to attend. Unfortunately, will not be able to attend because I'm starting my campaign to become mayor of my city, where I previously served as councilman and vice mayor. The names mentioned in your newsletter bring back fond memories of the 4 years I played in the WIL. They were the best years of my life in professional baseball. The managers, players, and cities we played in were fantastic, and the camaraderie between all of us was something of a bygone era. Professional baseball will never see the likes of it again. Just a little bit of history for you to mention at the banquet. Few people, if any, know that while at St. Mary's College of California, the Ray Tran, under NC2A competition, held the world record for throwing a baseball for distance, 436 feet. That's right, 436 feet. I had a great arm, and the furthest I ever threw it was 397 feet at the Oakland Oaks ball. Believe me, that little shit, Ray Tran, did just that. I remember my teammates, Jelma Happy, Rawhide Ronning, Spader, Peterson, Mall, Big John Marshall, Freeze, Brenner, Hub Kittle, Alan Strange, Sinovich, and the power man of his day, Dick Greco. Man, he could hit him far. As for pitchers, George Nicholas handled me like a baby, but I wore old Cy Green loud. In closing, sorry I can't be with you on this memorable night, but thanks for thinking of me. Be sure and keep me on your mailing list. Please tell the fellas hello for me. This is from Al Leitner. Sorry to inform you that health problems will prevent both Bill Beard and I from attending. Be assured both of us are very disappointed, but happen to be in that 80 and up age bracket, which usually has bad news for everyone. I look forward again to being a small part of the WIL gathering, and this time I will especially miss visiting such old favorites as Charlie Peterson, Old Grumpy, Dwight Aiden, and Buddy Peterson, who are listed as new on this year's roster. Old Grumpy provided me with one of the greatest things in my life when in 1940 he talked me into getting married to Alma Hansen at home plate here in Salem. 3 nights before the wedding, Pete and I tried to drink all the beer in Wenatchee on my bachelor's night party. Should anyone ask for details, Bill Beard is now undergoing 3-a-week dialysis treatments, and I'm trying to KO bouts with pneumonia and bronchitis. Outside of that, we're both in the on-deck circle. So that's just some of the comments that we've heard from players, and I just thought it was important to share that information with you. It's, again, my distinct pleasure to introduce Jim Price, who's been so instrumental in helping gather the information on the WIL and just helping us keep the whole league and all of the statistics in perspective. So I'm going to introduce Jim to take care of the rest of the program.
Thank you, Mark. I have one piece of advice for all of you. If Mark ever calls up and invites you to dinner, don't say yes till he gets to the part where he says, would you bring along a list of the 1,700 men who played in the Western International League? There were these 2 old ball players who had known one another since they were teenagers, had played years and years. Finally retired, and in retirement they used to go out for coffee every morning, sit around the coffee shop, and eventually they got to the point where one of them said to the other, do you suppose there's baseball in heaven? And the other one said, that's a great idea, I wonder if there is. And they talked about this off and on for a few weeks. And they ended up making a pact that whichever one of them died first and went to heaven, he'd come back to the other one some way or another and let him know whether there was indeed baseball in heaven. Well, the weeks and the months and the years went on. Eventually one of them died. And sure enough, in a few days, in a vision, he came back to his friend and said, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is, yes, there is baseball in heaven. And there are wonderful parks, and all the greatest players of all time are here, and even the greatest umpires are here, and the fields are wonderful, and the mounds are high, and the fences are good, and the grass is lovely. In fact, it's not good news, it's great news. But the bad news is that you're pitching tomorrow. A few words about the Western International League all-time roster that appears in your program. I had fondest hopes that it was going to be 100% complete by the time the program went to press. However, it turned out that the baseball guides themselves did not publish complete statistics for the 1942 season. There was a war going on, and that as was the habit at that time in the late 40s and in the early 50s for several years for many leagues, players who appeared in 10 games or fewer were not listed in the records. So therefore, if you see any additions or changes or corrections, Mark or I would sure like to hear them. The other thing is that, since this was a long time ago, in cases where, when in compiling the list, I didn't know whether Richard was called Dick or Richie or Rich, I left it Richard. Or if it was Bernard Brewer and I didn't know he was called Bud, it just says Bernard. So if you know things like that you see that aren't in the list, there again, Mark and I would love to know them. This afternoon we brought together not exactly a panel, but a group of people whose careers span spanned one way or another the history of the Western International League, which ran from 1937 to 1954. In fact, Harvey Story began and ended the Western International League, although he played most of his career in the Pacific Coast League in between all those years. But one of the people whose lives did span almost the entire history of the Western International League and got in on the ground floor, along with Harvey Story and Dwight Ayton, first as a player and then as a player manager. And he's going to tell us just in a few minutes some of the things about what it was starting off in the Western International League, how that first season was, what the ballparks were. A man whose career, among other things, left him with the second most games ever played in the Western International League, 1,172. He's also ranked in the top 5 or 6 in runs scored, 4th in runs added in, tied for 4th in career doubles, and many, many other numbers that I can spare you with. Let's have a welcome for Charlie Peterson.
First thing I want to tell you is Al Leitner could drink beer. He had hollow legs and leaked at both heels. I didn't start out in the WILL. My first year was in Ponca City, Oklahoma. Now, is there anybody from Oklahoma in here? Oh, I got one. Well, I don't want to offend you. The people were great. But, oh boy. But that weather, you're in Tornado Alley down there. And all I say when they asked me what I thought about it was, if the good Lord came down and give the world an enema, that's where he'd put the hose. Anyway, Bill Beck says that's the guy that you people remember in the World Series. He sent the little guy up 3 foot tall to pinch hit in the World Series. He told him, he said, now don't you dare swing at the ball. You stand right there. He had a strike zone of about like that. And he got walked, but he told him, he said, I got a man sitting in the stand with a telescopic sight on a high-powered rifle. If you swing that bat, he's going to kill you. And now that's supposed to be a true story. That's what he told the guy. Of course, he didn't have the guy in the stands. But anyway, get back. You can't beat this game. It's like somebody once said, you don't have to be 7 feet tall to play baseball. You don't have to be foot wide. No forehead and walk on your knuckles. Anybody can play the game. And it's the greatest game in the world. I had one guy say he was 84. Well, I'm 85. Married 61 years come October. My wife still makes my world go round. And I appreciate being here, and I'm glad you called. Thank you.
The next gentleman played all of the pre-World War II era in the Western International League and put up some pretty distinguished numbers of himself. In fact, they said if he could steal first base, he would have hit 500. He ranks 3rd in career triples, 7th in career stolen bases, 12th in career runs. He started coming out of Willamette University, where he played on an exceptionally fine colleagues team with such men as Bill Beard, who's been almost a lifelong friend of his. And then came to Spokane in 1938 and played with the Indians 38 through 42 before the league paused for the war. And then after the war in 1946, he was the business manager of the team at the time of the terrible bus wreck on Snoqualmie Pass. His career average in the Western International League was over 300, a long career as a successful and highly regarded insurance man in Spokane. He's going to tell us some about some of the really colorful and interesting men he played with in the Western International League. Here's Dwight Ayton.
I signed the Boston Red Sox contract out of Willamette University and was going to be sent back to Kenton, Ohio. And the league had just started, and Lewiston, Idaho lost 23 games in a row. And so they named manager Wes Schulmerich, and he was looking for ball players, and the scout for Boston, Earl Shealy, said, I'm changing your direction, you're going to Lewiston, Idaho. So I joined the Lewiston team while they were in Tacoma. They played a week at a time, and it rained 7 days in Tacoma, and we sat in a hotel and waited to go back to Lewiston. I got out to get into their bus, and it was about a 21-passenger Dodge with wicker seats, and there wasn't room enough for your knees, and so you sat there and jiggled till they were all chafed on the way home, down there. It was a great place to play. It was very hot weather. In fact, we found out that there was no air conditioning in the old Bollinger Hotel, so we got some rooms up on top of the hill, and in came umpire team of Frisco Edwards and Bill Duran. They tried it one night in the hotel, couldn't sleep, and they said, where are you guys staying? And we said, well, we're up on the hill here. They got any more beds? Yeah. So we roomed with the umpires for a week, and the first morning Frisco rolled out of bed and sat on the edge, and he was an old-time catcher, and his fingers were just really beat up. And we looked at him and said, what are you doing, Frisco? He says, well, I'm exercising my fingers. He couldn't even get them together. They were so beat up. I played that year, and then moved up to Spokane the next summer and played with some great ball players, Wes Shomerick and Smead Jolly. Smead and I were roommates, and Smead and I were in spring training down at Prosser, Washington, and I came down with the mumps, and Smead was really worried. He says, I can't remember whether I ever had the mumps or not, but for about 3 weeks he was worried, and then he found out he didn't have to go through that, but I did. We had a great time there. I've had some very enjoyable times recently in restoring some memories as far as baseball is concerned, especially today. And I didn't realize that I could cover as much outfield as Mike Budnick claims I did while he was pitching. One of the greatest things that happened to me, and you men of the WI League are about my age, and you know, we can strike out at any minute, and I just wanted to tell you the greatest thing that happened to me was at age 50, I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, and now I know where I'm going to spend eternity. Thank you.
The third gentleman himself wasn't a player in the Western International League, but he certainly spent a good portion of his life in it because his father, Dick, became a part owner and the general manager at Yakima in 1947. After a couple of years in Yakima, they sold the Yakima franchise, and he and his partners bought the Wenatchee franchise in 1949, and then the very next year moved that franchise to Tri-City, where a couple of years later, Charlie Peterson was the manager. Dick Richards, his son, spent a lot of his teen years hanging around those ballparks and knows a lot of the players, including Charlie Peterson himself. He's responsible for the excellent scrapbook and some of the other things that are on display here today. And he knows a lot of the people active in professional baseball in the Sacramento area, which of course has been a rich hotbed, especially in the 1940s and 50s, of players who played in the Western International League. So I'd like you to meet Richard.
Is everybody having as good a time as I am? It's really great to be here today. I'm not going to say too much. I got most of my family down there, but the time I want to take is to talk a little bit about the gentleman that isn't here. And I guess I'm going to try to give you a very quick point of view of what it was like to be in the front office in the professional baseball back in the playing days that these fellows are talking about. And I want to talk about my dad. I can go back to 1948 and remember a trip that he and my mother, Marjorie, who was right down here at the end of the table, took down to Sacramento
with a certified check for $25,000 in his pocket to buy the Wenatchee Chiefs franchise. And that $25,000 got you the players and the contracts and the uniforms and I think a long lease on the ballpark and the debts and all the rest of it. And we up there and tried to get settled in Wenatchee. And in the process of doing that, we rented a place to live in from the famous or infamous Mike Budnick, I don't know which, but anyway, I spent that 49 season living in Mike Budnick's house. We still had the connection with the Wenatchee Chiefs, and when it came time to start auctioning all those players off to get them down to the lower minors to get a little more experience, we were coveting the likes of a young man by the name of Richie Myers. I was 15, he was about 18, and he was a sensation at Elk Grove High School right out of Sacramento in his high school years as a pitcher. But the Solons wanted to make a shortstop out of Rich because he had a tremendous arm and he was a good hitter. So they were a little reluctant to send him up to Wenatchee. I can't remember the name of the general manager at the time, but I do remember it was telling my dad he didn't want to send this bright, prospective young star up to Sacramento where he'd be out carousing with all these beer drinkers and women chasers and this and that and the other thing. And does that sound familiar to you? Anyway, they finally agreed to do that, and the thing that sold him was that he was going to get a chance to live in our house. He was going to room with the general manager, and I was going to be his roommate. I mean, this was terrific because there's a lot of hero worship in there. Of course, I had the advantage of Richie because being the son of the owner, I was the heir apparent to all the old gloves and bats and balls and jock straps and everything you guys left around the clubhouse when the season was over. So I had quite an array of this stuff. And Rich was down there and he was looking at all my stash, counter man there, and he was trying out the gloves and everything. And he found one he really liked. I said, Richie, you can have it. Be my guest. It's yours. I went on to take that. I don't know how long he used it. He finally got to try out with a Cubs several seasons later. I know they still have their glove in it or not. Anyway, if we can flash forward from that point 45 years, my wife and I have a magazine that we published on the Sacramento area, and I did a story in 1993 about the 49 Wenatchee Chiefs, which was not a great pitching club, sorry, Si, but they were terrific offensively. I mean, I think every guy in the lineup, Charlie, they all had 20 home runs or more, didn't they? Pretty close to it. Anyway, they were a real power. So we did this story, and lo and behold, not long after that, I got a phone call from Richie Myers, who's living down there, who I had not seen in all these many years. And we started reminiscing, and went out for lunch and this and that and the other thing. And I was really all thrilled with this whole thing. So I called up my dad, who was still alive. He passed away a couple of years ago. He's living down Sun City. I said, hey, guess who I saw? I said, you remember Richie Myers? He said, did you get your glove back? Now, I got to tell you, see, that tells you what it was like to be a general manager in the minor leagues, a Class B league, back in the 40s and 50s. I mean, you really had to watch the buck and do this and do that and the other. So he had all the right ideas. Now, I kind of like to bounce in a little different direction after telling you that story and go back to about 1952 when a lot of the fun and games were over and the attendance at a lot of minor league ballparks plummeting. I mean, it was tough. You used to draw 2,000, 3,000. It was tough to get 300 or 400 out sometimes. And we just about reached the end of the string, and my dad was pretty well convinced after 5 or 6 years that his long-term future was not going to be in baseball, and he decided that he would get out. He had the Tri-City Braves at that time. They moved the Wenatchee franchise down there, and he decided that it was time for him to get out. And one of his partners, along with several others, was Babe Hollingbury, who was formerly the coach of Washington State back in the early 30s. And so he mustered all these people together, and they paid off the creditors, and they paid off the partners, and this and that and the other thing. And I think my mother will attest to this. They left the Tri-City area
with not much more than, I don't even know if they had the pink slip in my car, but that was about it. And Babe asked my dad, he said, well, what are you going to do, Dick? He said, well, he said, I've been looking at Eugene, or he said, I think I'll go down there and get back into the outdoor advertising business, which is really his trade or craft, if you will. And so Babe looked at him, and he took his checkbook out of the pocket, and he wrote a check. He didn't write a check. He pulled a blank check out and signed his name on it and gave it to my dad. And he says, Dick, he says, take whatever you need and pay me back when you can. And that got him. He did. He subsequently did very, very well. And being back now after advertising. But things like that, stories like that, are things that just don't seem to happen in our day and age. And they're things that I really, really cherish. And I'm happy to share those with you folks. Thank you.
The final speaker this afternoon, this part of the program, is a gentleman that I met, can you believe, 49 years ago in Stockton, California. He was introduced to me as the only man in baseball who combed his hair with the big end of the comb. But he really had a lot bigger role to play in the game than that. He's had one of the most distinguished careers in Western baseball circles for over a half century. He just retired a couple of months ago. And to prove what a big deal it was when Don Freese retired, the speakers were Sandy Alderson, the former general manager of the Oakland A's, and former commissioner Peter Ueberroth. His connection with the Western International League was he was a manager and player manager at Victoria the last 4 seasons of the WIL. Then when Victoria folded that last year, he went to Yakima. And then when the Northwest League took the place of the WIL in 1955, he spent a couple of years at Tri-Cities. So to give you an idea of what it was like in those years at the end of the WIL and the beginning of the Northwest League, and also give you a few details about his exciting and enduring career that included playing, managing, scouting, working as an executive, here's Don Freese.
First, speaking on behalf of all of the Western International League members here, as we feel to be your guests, we'd like to thank the Oldtimers of Tacoma for including us as a part of your program. And equally, we would like to thank those of you that have been, and congratulate you that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Indeed, that's an honor. We're privileged to be a part of this program this afternoon. As I look back on my 54 years of professional baseball, and I look into this room, I think 2 words come to me, and one of them, of course, would be the word miracle. A miracle, personally, from the standpoint of where I started and where I was fortunate enough to end up. Coming from the so-called wrong side of the tracks, and then ending up being a part of the office of the commissioner. It indeed was a road that was long, but indeed it was a privilege and something that I really never expected, but was so very, very thankful that it came about. I was fortunate to have all of that happen to me. But I look back, and as we think of miracles that have happened, we could probably look throughout this room and you would all say that indeed you're a part of a miracle. All of us that have been involved in baseball as youngsters, a game that we loved and cherished, that we embraced and wanted to take care of, suddenly we found ourselves as adults being a part of that. Whatever degree of success it may have been, if you wanted to call it success, we were a part of something that we enjoyed playing. We were a part of something that as youngsters we devoted ourselves to and we dedicated it to. And here we find ourselves these years later, still a part, still loving, still appreciating, still embracing, still wanting to take care of that game that we do love called baseball. So indeed, that's a miracle, whether you played it professionally, whether you may have played it in the area of semi-pro, whether you played hardball or softball, whatever it may have been. It's a miracle for all of us to remain and have this attachment. And not only is it a miracle, indeed it's a privilege. And it's something that we certainly must remember and never forget, that we are privileged to be a part of the game called baseball. I look to and hear with interest as we speak about the Western International League of yesteryear and the differences of those in that era compared to today. We were trying to survive in those days, believe me. There were times as management that I knew and knew of that I didn't know if payrolls were ever going to be met. And that wasn't at one franchise, that was at most franchises. Mr. Richards here spoke about it, briefly talked about it, but I can remember the days that we didn't know if payrolls were going to be met. We remember at the mercy of people within the community trying to raise funds that we could pay salaries and that we could so-called stay alive. We're not experiencing that today in minor league baseball. Minor league baseball today is thriving. Franchises are being sold at high levels, and we're thankful for that, because those days were hard days, and they too were miracle days. I think the miracle that we could all relate to probably most readily would be the miracle that indeed we survived, other than 1 or 2 times, we survived bus trips. As we look back at the buses that we rode in those days, and the men that we entrusted our lives in, that they wore gray pants and brown pants when they were bus drivers, and they became trainers when they put on white pants. And we were entrusting our lives in these men as we wove ourselves in and out throughout the mountains of the Northwest. It was a miracle. Fortunately, we most made it, some did not. But as you look back at that, that indeed was a miracle. And it didn't affect our love for the game in any way. We still get off that bus and we wanted to play that game and we wanted to beat somebody and we wanted to beat them badly. They don't experience that today, thank goodness. They live in modern buses, or they travel in airplanes, and they're treated far, far much better than we were ever treated. But again, it didn't deter us from a standpoint of wanting to become successful to whatever degrees we may have been successful in the area of professional baseball. I can remember a time with the Victoria Club that it was very obvious that we weren't going to make it. It came out in the newspaper that there was no way that Victoria was going to be able to stay alive. Suddenly a couple came forward. They met us and there was a general manager by the name of Reg Patterson that some of you may remember. And I was the playing manager at that time. This couple came in and their name was Ferguson Pollock. And Mr. Ferguson Pollock, regardless of whatever month of the year it may have been, he always had an overcoat on. And he also was a chain smoker that he never knocked off the ashes. The ashes just continued to fall down his chest. Mrs. Ferguson Pollock owned a fur coat. And I'm certain that fur coat had been shot and killed many, many, many years ago. But there were 2 people who we were jumping up for joy and wanting to see, because they told us that they were going to sell a castle in England, and that they would sell this castle in England, and with that money, they would devote it, dedicate it, and donate it to the Victoria Baseball Club. I remember the time that we were having a discussion as far as what was actually going to take place. We were coming to the point where we were about to get this commitment from Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson Pollock. And just about that time, as we're seated at the Dominion Hotel, who some of you may have remembered back in those days, poor Mrs. Ferguson Pollock got a sharp pain in her right knee. She couldn't move her right knee. Well, you never saw a 240-pound man like Reg Patterson and a 190-pound man like myself move so quickly as anyone has ever moved. We got underneath that table and we started to rub Mrs. Ferguson Pollock's knee, because that Mrs. Ferguson Pollock's knee did not represent a knee, but it represented $30,000. We rubbed that knee, and thankfully we were successful in the pain going away, and we were successful in receiving our $30,000. We did things in those days that indeed were different than today. If you can recall, we used to put on, there were different evening programs, different events that we would cherish and hopefully would bring additional people to our ballpark. There would be a dairy night, if you would would recall. And I can remember two different dairy nights that we had, one most very clearly, and then I can also remember pony night, and we all had a pony night. You can remember those in the days that you fellas played. Many times we would have a fellow by the name of Jackie Price that would come into town and he'd try to shoot a ball out of his ballpark with this cannon that he had as he rode around in a Jeep. Well, this particular night, we were going to have what we called Dairy Night. And I was the general manager, playing manager of the Tri-City Club at that time. And the club that we were going to play was Yakima. And I came up with the idea of having a mystery guest coach first base, and we would sell programs, and then in the fifth inning, we would have a drawing, and as far as anyone who guessed who the mystery coach was at first base, they would receive $100. That time, that happened, for that particular series, we were playing against Mr. Hub Kittle and his Yakima Bears. And of course, I knew Hub extremely well. We used to make those trades with each other that I'll trade somebody who can't play if you trade back to me somebody who can't play, and we tell the newspaper that we made a great deal on that particular day. And we would make those kind of trades together, and I went to Hub and I said, Hub, I got a great idea. I said, we're going to have dairy night, and I want to have a mystery guest in a cow pit coach first base. And I was wondering if maybe one of your star pitchers, who's not going to pitch for a couple of days, if he'd be willing to coach first base. Hub said, don't worry about it, Donnie. He always called me Donnie, and when he called me Donnie, there was always a caution that went with that. But he called me Donnie, he said, don't worry about it, I got just the person for you. I said, what do you mean, Hub, just the person for you? He said, I got the identical person that will rise to the occasion and do this job great. Drawing in the fifth inning, I have no problem because no one's going to guess Mrs. Hub Kittle. No one will guess Mrs. Hub Kittle. That particular evening, we had the drawing in the fifth inning, and after we counted the results, there was one ticket that said Mrs. Hub Kittle, and it cost me $100 to pay that person off. I later found out that Hub brought a member of his family along with him. The particular individual paid off happened to be a son of Hub Kittle. The other evening that I'll never forget was what we called Pony Night. We had Pony Night every now and then in Tri-City, and it was a big thing. And I went to Spokane to look at ponies for that particular event that we were going to have. And I looked and I saw a beautiful pony. Thought it was going to be a pony that would really do the job, and I came back and I said, I won't pay you now, but that looks like the pony I'm going to take, but I may look around a little bit. Came back and the word got around in the clubhouse that we were going to have a pony night, and I had an outfielder on the club at that time that you might remember. He eventually played in the big leagues with the St. Louis Cardinals, and his name was Ellis Burton. And Ellis come up to me and he said, Mr. Preece, he said, I've heard about pony night. He said, and before you do anything, I've got a friend that owns a stable here in the Tri-City area. I can get you the pony. And what'd you say you were going to pay for it? I said, $500. I bet I can get you one for $250. I said, Ellis, I'd like to go take a peek at the pony if I could. He said, no problem. It's a beautiful stable out here right over the hill. Well, I got in the car and we followed Ellis out there. Well, his idea of a beautiful stable was not exactly my idea of a beautiful stable. It was bar X something with the sign hanging down, just hanging on by the skin of its teeth. The horses were definitely underfed, but the pony didn't look too bad. Wasn't a bad-looking pony. And as I say in those days, we're talking about making ends meet. So I asked the gentleman, I said, how much did you want for this pony? He said, $250. I said, you've got a deal. I'll take this pony from you. Well, pony night came, and we had one of the biggest nights of the season. We had about 5,000 people. And in the fifth inning, we drew for the pony. And a girl by the name of Becky Anderson was the winner. A little tiny girl, and she came out, and she was all excited. She stroked her pony, she touched her pony, she walked around with her pony, and I was as happy as could be because pony night was going to be a success. It cost me $250 rather than $500. The next morning, the phone rang. Mr. Prees? Yes. This is Becky Anderson's mother. We have a little problem, and I really don't know what to do about it, she said. She said, Becky keeps getting on the horse, and he keeps falling down. He said, he keeps getting on the horse, and he keeps, yes, she can't stay on for any period of time without the horse collapsing, and it keeps falling. I said, well, I don't know. I thought the pony was in good shape, and I didn't dare tell her I only paid $250 for it. But to make this long story short, we finally found out that the pony had some kind of a disease, joints of its knees, and it couldn't stand any weight of any kind, let alone a 105-pound little girl. It couldn't stand any weight. It was lucky that it stood up when you put a saddle on it. So that was one of the experiences that we had when we looked at the fundraisers of those days and the kind of things that we did to keep the minor leagues going. And that's exactly what we were doing. We were keeping the minor leagues going, hoping that we could produce a product that someday, eventually, that would end up at the major league level. And we don't have that today. Today we have a totally different scene. And I've been a part of the commissioner's office for the past 11 years, and I've seen the things that have happened, some that are good for baseball, some that are not good for baseball. But I see a program from a standpoint from the minor leaguer, where we all can relate, that is treated much far better than ever before. We not only have managers now, but we have coaches. We have infield coaches, we have outfield coaches, we have catching coaches. You have more coaches on the minor league level than you probably have, or at least the same, at the major league level. We have a roving coaching program that is supposed to develop the athlete into becoming a major league producer, productive at the major league level. So from that side of it is good, and it's better for the youngster. We have a different environment from a standpoint of the sale of minor league teams. I can remember the days when Richards' dad had his club for sale. He probably would have sold that club if somebody would have paid the bills. Today we have minor league teams that are being sold in the areas of millions of dollars. So we have a total scene that is changing in the minor leagues that is indeed for the better. And we're thankful that it is for the better, because we're hopeful that it's going to make us and give us better players at the major league level. But again, everything that we see in our baseball industry isn't as we look. And I would like to encourage you and just ask you to do something as you recall the fact of what baseball has meant to you. We're caught up into the habits of becoming baseball bashers. We form a habit of being on a negative side and talking about our game rather than talking about it on a positive side. Regardless of what we see in the areas of salaries, regardless of what we see in the areas of attitudes, some of the things that we don't like as we look at the so-called role models of baseball. I would encourage you to remember what baseball has meant to you and what it can mean to you, and as well as the younger generation. And speak of baseball only of a positive nature and not on a negative nature. To be a baseball builder and not to be a baseball basher. Because it's still the great game that it's always been. It's the great game as it's played between the white lines as we know it. We still see players that can play. We see players that are productive. And we see players that are exciting. And we look upon it as being entertained. And I would encourage you to be those that look upon it that way and no other way. We can bash it easily. It's easily to be bashed. We have lots of things wrong with it that need correcting, but you and I aren't going to correct it. And I don't know if we'll ever see it corrected. But we can also be builders of baseball as we use that, or hopefully it will be an example for our youth as having something to look up to and something to have in the future. I work for 3 outstanding commissioners. I work for Bart Giamatti, I worked for Mr. Vincent, and the best of all was Peter Uberoff. Peter Uberoff, if he was commissioner today, our game would not be in the circumstances that it finds itself. Hopefully someday that we will have a commissioner that would be that type of an individual. So I ask for your support and encourage you to continue to be supporters of the game that we all love. The other thing that I would look to you and ask for you to do before I sit down, as long as I have this microphone in front of me, I think if you look back as ball players, and as I look back as a ball player, I can look to one man, one individual that committed himself to making me a better ball player. Whether it be a dad, whether it be an uncle, whether it be a brother, or whether it be a coach, there was one person who committed himself to making you better. We find in baseball today youth programs that center on a factor called winning and losing. They want to know who, the first thing they want to know is who won and who lost. That isn't what made us better. That isn't what made us better in this room, as we did become better as players. What made us better is that we had one man who committed himself to wanting to make us a better player. But beside that, we had one man that not only committed himself to wanting to make us a better ball player, we had one man that committed himself in wanting to make us a better human being. So I would challenge each one of you in this room who love the game exactly as I do, who love it as much as I do, and who has loved it for as many years as we all have loved it, to take it upon yourselves to commit yourself. Perhaps it's to the boy across the street. Perhaps it's to a grandson. Perhaps it's to a nephew. But teach him the basic fundamentals of how to play the game. They're being taught today, but they're not being taught the right way. And the most important thing, that the starting place would be as far as how to throw the baseball and where to throw it from. So I challenge each one of you to think about some youngster from within your community or within your family that you can either make a better ball player out of, but indeed by spending time with him, you will make him a better person. And I challenge you to that. It's exciting for me to come here and visit with you, to see former employees of mine, Ray Malgrady, Buddy Peterson, and Al Ronning, all worked for me for years, all were committed to the game just as I was. And I ask you, as I sit down, to make a commitment as well to the game that we all love. Thanks so very much.
Thank you very much, Don, and Ted, and Charlie, and Jet, and Dwight. And thank you also, of course, to the Pierce County Tacoma Oldtimers Baseball Softball Association for putting on this event. It's a great event that we all enjoyed these last 2 years with Western International League players joining in with the local people. And also, of course, a special thank you to Mark Blau, who's done so much hard work putting this together. And now the program, here is Mark. And one thing, Red Adams, would you see me when we're done? Thank you.
Again, I want to extend my congratulations to all of the Hall of Fame inductees here from the Tacoma area. I want to again thank you, members of the 1950 Midland team, for coming here and gathering and allowing us to honor you. We enjoyed it. It was our pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again in the years to come. Certainly want to thank again all of the WIL players and front office people for helping make this day a special one. A couple quick reminders. WIL players, if you've not signed the guest book, please do so before you leave. We do have a photographer here. If you're interested in having some photos of some of your old teammates, old cronies, Mike will be around here for about another 15-20 minutes. He'll be happy to take some pictures. May 16th, 1999. The date is published in your program. Please mark it on your calendar. Please help spread word. Please help us find more players. Let's have them get in touch with us. We have a mailing list of about 300. There's a lot of other people out there. And finally, we would like to take a team picture of all the WIL people here. So if you would right now head back to the back of the room, we'll take a quick team picture, and then you're welcome to just stick around however long you want and chat. And again, thank you very much for making this a special day.
Nice. And a person that nearly everyone loved, apparently.
Oh, yeah, Eddie. I knew him later.
Yeah,
I
I
was still in high
assume
school.
probably,
I
yeah, you
didn't
later
graduate from high school in 1944. When did you graduate from high school?
Oh, about 1967, I think it was.
67, my foot.
38.
After the war, for just 4 seasons, Bremerton was in the Western International League, 1946, 47, 48, and 49. Consistently had outstanding ball clubs, wonderful veteran pitching,
Yeah.
and still, bad luck or whatever, never managed to finish first.
Well, they were in first place, I read in what you wrote here, when the regular season
In
ended.
47.
And then they extended it for 10 more days, and in that 10 days, they dropped 2.5 games back. But at the end of the regular
That was in
season.
48, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, they did. But they were one game out 1 year and 2.5 games out the second. But up there battling for first all season long.
Obviously,
We were there all the time.
Both in 47 and 48, which were your first 2 years, right
Yeah.
now, both years, Bremerton obviously could have won. Was there a pivotal game or a series or a week?
Was that, what year Wolf Camilli come in there?
That was 48.
God almighty. Did we won 24 out of 25 games?
Yeah.
And they beat us by half a game or
with all
or
this-
something?
Yeah.
I seen Dolph. I've
With
seen
all these
Dolph.
30-year-old players, yeah.
Dolph just died last year, but I see him every year for all those years. And she says, "You son of a gun, you come in. That's the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen." They won 24 out of the 25
Yeah,
games,
that's
and
unbelievable.
we were in 10 games in head. We ended up half game out or
Yeah,
one game out.
yeah.
They won.
I've never seen
They
that
won
like that.
21 of their last 25.
Something like that.
And they won 41 out of their last 48.
Oh, it was it's unheard of.
Yeah. John Cordell, who was who knows how old then,
Well, he
he still pitched there 4 or 5 years. He pinch hit in both games of a doubleheader the week before the season, the next to last weekend of the season, won both games pinch hitting, and came back 7 days later and became the only person in the history of the league to pitch and win both games of doubleheader.
He's a busy boy.
On the next day, it was like 3 days before the end of the season. And Camilli told me, he said that all the pitchers were used up. And he said, so after the first game of the doubleheader that day, I called the guys together and they were sitting in the locker room, rolled the ball out in the middle of the floor and said, whoever wants it can pitch the second game. And Cordell says, I'll do it. And he did. And after all, he'd already won the 7-inning game. He went out and won the 9-inning game.
That's amazing.
And probably you both remember this, was earlier that season, in August, I think it was, August the 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere around there, is Bremerton played at Spokane, and that's the series where the ballpark was sold out for every game of the series instead of a minor league record. Is that a series you remember?
Couldn't get more people in there.
Was that Ferris Field? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a record, in fact, of that game in that series.
What do you remember about those games? Must have been a great series. The crowd obviously was great.
Oh, yeah. I remember Eddie Murphy had a good series over there. He was always getting on base. He was center fielder for the Bremerton. But the one memory that I have is the year before Al got there, and the first year Bremerton had a team.
46.
They had a lot of pickups here and there, and some from Oakland and whatnot. They had a guy named A1 Wright, who was had played in the major some, but he hit the barley corn. And
Oh, yeah. Him and Bill Bearsaw.
yeah, he didn't show up this night, and there was a guy named Frank Pluff who was official scorer up there in the press box with me.
Pluff?
Frank Pluff.
Yeah.
Remember him? Yeah. Okay, they needed a second baseman real bad, so they could. Frank, they knew he'd played some ball, semi-pro, whatnot, and the guys had been, you know, how they always do when he called an error instead of a hit, they'd scream and holler at him, and they thought I don't know anything about this game. So he went down there, and he got 2 triples the first time he played. He led the team in hitting with about 375 the rest of the year. I saw him.
Was he the one who a detective?
That was his brother. Yeah, Frank.
Frank was a left-hand hitter.
Yeah, squat, left-hand hitter, very stubby, strong, all line drives.
On the Bremerton teams of that whole period there, which some of them came and went, Murphy was there and then went to Spokane after going to Victoria, and Hub Kittle was there for a while. But the catcher, and I'm wondering if he was influential in your career, Al, was a veteran player named Frank Volpe.
Frank Volpe was
who was an original Western International League guy in 1937, played in the league off and on for 15 years, and just died last year at the age of 91.
He was a concessions man at the San Jose Muni Ballpark,
Yes,
him and Mary. I'd see him twice a week, and I'd go in, and Frank, he knew where everything was at. You know, well, see, I went to spring training in 47 as an outfielder, okay? And Alan Strange, Bill Barasoff came back.
Was this your first pro season?
Yeah, Bill Barasoff came back.
Bill Barasoff came back. Okay.
He'd gone up to the Giants.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy came back, right?
Yeah.
Jay Ragney hit 373 the year before. And I'll never forget, Alan Strange says to me, hey, Al, he says, can you play any place else? I said, where the hell do you want me to play? He said, well, what can you do? What do you want me to do? Can you catch? Hell yeah, I can catch. Never caught a damn alive. Went behind home plate, caught. He released 4 catchers, kept Frank Volpe, and I backed up Frank.
Well, they darn.
That's how I was an outfielder.
Do you remember that night that the Yakima team jumped on Volpe at home plate and Kittle was up in the broadcast booth on the roof with me? I thought he was going to jump out, but he yelled and hollered so much he knocked the station right off the air. He was holding his mic like this and yelling right over the top of it because Volpe is his catcher and he's his closest buddy on the team, you know.
Oh, yeah.
He got a catcher.
I was there.
There was a real rivalry between Yakima and
What started the fuss?
I don't know.
Somebody sliding into home? No.
Something like that probably. Anyway, Volpe had been mistreated
Frank would never start anything unless he was somebody antagonized him.
Wasn't Frank a fairly small man?
No, he was about 5'10", 195 pounds.
Oh, he was that big?
Yeah.
He was
strong.
Maybe 5'9", I don't know, but he was strong. You know, he's a legend in San Jose, you know.
I knew he was
played. He's on the Hall of Fame or whatever that whole thing is down there.
What kind of guy was he?
Great, outstanding.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Was he a real leader type? Obviously, you've got a pitching staff.
I would say Frank was he was kind of a jokester, and he could mimic things, I
never saw so many ball players of such good nature as was on that team when Al was playing there.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I think was Alan Strange. They knew he was somebody they could count on as a knowledgeable guy.
I was going to ask you about Alan too, because you can hear conflicting reports about Alan.
Well, I was in the Dodgers, I caught in the Dodger organization in Montreal. I played for Alston 3 years before he went, 2 years before he went to big leagues. I put Alan Strange as a manager as good as Alston ever was.
I've heard it said that...
Let me tell you a story. When I was sold to Victoria for 50 seasons when they folded, me and John Marshall, Alan Strange called me, come on down. I went with him to Spokane and met with Freddie Hutchison. Freddie Hutchison, because Freddie Hutchison was getting the Cincinnati job. He wanted Freddie Hutchison to take me at that time before they sold me to Victoria. And Freddie's like, my hands are tied, I can't do nothing. I was in the room. And I'll never forget, he said, Alan, I'm getting the job, I'm sure. You're going to be my coach in Cincinnati. I'll never forget this, that broke Alan's heart. When he got the job, the front office and everything would not let Freddie Hutchison take his own men. And I was in the room, and then Alan Strange called me and said, that Freddie couldn't take me to the big leagues. And that really downed Alan. I was there. He said, Al, you're my coach, one of my coaches. And then it fell through.
Well, Strange was Hutch's manager at 55.
I know what I would say.
Seattle Rainiers, so they got along real well.
They were good friends, and I remember he took me to Spokane with him, Al did.
So what happened then when because at that time, Bremerton's franchise moved to Wenatchee on Victoria?
No, they sold John Marshall and myself to Victoria in 50.
And then the franchise went to Wenatchee. And Alan Strange did not go with them?
No, him, what's his name, the other guy? The guy that owned it.
Oh, Shepard, Bill Shepard.
What a crook. I don't want to say a crook, but he's a con man.
One of those,
better word?
One of those rapid dental.
They'd close him up. He'd make dental things, and they close him up, and the next day he'd be down the street about 10 blocks, have another office. And there was a lot of money in that business, and he...
Oh, yeah.
He did that. No license.
That's what kept
the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Frank Volpe, and that's why I asked you about his personality, is that this was, at the least, a fairly colorful pitching staff with different kind of guys. You got Hunt, who's a real loud, boisterous, outgoing guy. John Marshall, who by most reports drank a lot. Joe Sullivan, I guess, who at least had a drinking problem.
Well, Sullivan was great in them.
Jeez. Do you remember they had the night for him?
Yeah.
They had a night for Joe Sullivan, right? And Alan Strange knows he was drinking, so all his buddies come up and he disappeared. They're looking for Joe Sullivan. He's supposed to pitch. They gave him presents. They had a big night for him, right? He came out. He's kind of intoxicated. They got it, and he says, "Oh my God!" So get somebody warming up in the stands, under the stands. Get somebody going. The first, he got to start him. They got all those people in the first pitch he throws. I'm catching. Throws the ball, hits the screen, and I said, "Go on, talk to him. Go on, talk to him." But he got out there, and he went, what, 1 inning, 2 innings? Had to get him out of the game.
Yeah.
And that was his night. But his buddies took him out of there, and they were drinking, booze and stuff.
He did pitch pretty good ball for them.
He always pitched
He got
Pitched
sobered
very well
up.
all 4 years, and then he retired, I guess.
But before the war, he pitched a 15-inning game for the Red Sox or somebody.
Yeah, I just realized a couple months ago.
Detroit.
He was in the big leagues at an early
Yeah.
and the record makes it look as if he played his way out of the big leagues.
Well, in 40, let's see, 38, 39, 40.
And the war didn't help, of course, at his age.
We had semi-pro league, 10-team semi-pro league, and he pitched in that league. And,
He was a fireman.
Yeah, and he pitched in that league, and we were scared to death of him the first time we played against him. But he threw a couple like you're talking about. We could just wait him out and get a walk off.
Well, he knuckleball. He threw that knuckleball.
Yeah, you couldn't hit, if he got it where he wanted it, you couldn't hit it.
That was a good pitching staff, wasn't it? Especially with this
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Oh, there was a guy named Lohman.
Oh, Bill
Lowen,
And
Jim Loman.
Bill Ahern.
Bill Ahern.
He won 10, lost 5. He was an apprentice in a shipyard, electrician.
I suppose everyone knows, I don't know whether it was in 1946 when he had a great year, or in 47 when he didn't have a great year. I suppose everyone knows the Bill Barasoff in the Fog story.
Well, Bill was, I guess funny story about that. We had a big fight on one night. On the way home, the season was over. And he always called me Rook, and I was laying sleeping in the bus, and he come walking by and knocked me on the floor of the bus. And I get up and I decked him. And so Hub Kidley, I'll go outside, we're having a good fight, It's all over with. So quite a few years later, I managed in Santa Barbara. Guess who came to me as a pitcher? Bill Barasoff's son. And Bill and his wife came up, and we hadn't seen each other for years, good friends and stuff. He came up, and he played for me.
Bill himself had started out as a pitcher.
He did?
He pitched in the Cal League in 1941 and pitched against Ray Tran. I was just looking at the stats last night, discovered the Barasoff.
I never knew.
Well, the thing about Barasoff is that field in Bremerton was just the screwiest alignment of outfield fences you could ever imagine.
In what way?
I never seen that. I never seen that old part.
You didn't? Well, yeah, you played in it. That's what we had in 47.
No, 47, you did move the fences back.
I guess they did move back.
Oh, hell,
But they started out, and they had confined.
No, I didn't see that fence.
Maybe the league made them move them back, but it was 295 down the left field line, and only 310 to dead center field. So
I never seen that.
High ball, to a right-hander's power alley was hitting the fence, and most of them going over. And he got 40 home runs, so he led the whole league in home runs. And the Giants paid Barron $16,000 with $4,000 down, and the rest, if he stuck with the Giants, I think he'd hit him. But he didn't. He couldn't hit a curveball or something.
And then the next year,
you spin the ball and he'd bail out.
Yeah.
But I never seen that part. They moved in 47. It was a regulation part.
Yeah, they probably moved the fences back. I know that was the year too. I found out I needed glasses because I had a guy up there from the radio station with me on the booth, and I said, these guys, they put all this money and have these fences covered with these signs for advertising. God, you can't even read them. You think it'd be bigger letters. And he says, "Who can't read them?" He loaned me his glasses. All I needed was some glasses. I was out there trying to call guys making running catches in right center field.
That's when I knew I needed glasses.
So they all came out. They were so exciting,
Yeah.
Looked like they were going to be over their head or something.
That's when I knew I needed glasses. I couldn't read the numbers of the pitchers warming up in the bullpen.
Oh, yeah.
That was the official score.
Yeah.
Back to Alan Strange, and it may have been mostly reflected by younger players at Spokane when he was there in 51, I think it was, is that a couple of players had said that